coming out tonight. It's so nice to have Todd back for his new book, So Good It's Bad. And the remarkable Miss Nancy Davis Kho is going to be in conversation with him.
We're going to be in conversation.
They're going to be
That's what's going to happen
with
here.
each other.
Conversing.
So let's welcome them both here to Great Good Place.
Thank you. I was going to ask who had read the book, but I think I know. I don't think I know. So
It just came out.
yeah. No, it wasn't a homework assignment.
Let me blow a little smoke for Kathleen, if I may.
Thank you.
So, Kathleen Caldwell, who runs the bookstore that is the heart and soul of Montclair Village here in Oakland, she has an amazing roster of writers, and every time I get a chance to talk with an author here, I thank Kathleen, and I remind all of you that without us buying books, Kathleen doesn't get to stay here. So, buy Todd's book, but pick up another one too. Look at all the books. There's so many. So many good books, and what we love about Kathleen is she is the hand seller of all hand sellers. She will tell you what to get, so you will find something tonight. So thank you, Kathleen, for having us.
Welcome, guys.
And as I was just explaining, Todd and I know each other because his niece is my daughter's best friend, and I was thrilled. Was it only a year ago that your other book?
Yeah, it was almost exactly.
You're prolific, because it is, yeah. So a year ago I got to talk with Todd about his first book, which is also available here, called Please Don't Be Waiting for Me. I'm going to hand sell that one to you right now. And I should say my name is Nancy Davis Kho. I have a blog called Midlife Mixtape. I have a podcast called Midlife Mixtape. We talk about the years between being hip and breaking one, and I'm excited to get to interview you again. Now, a year ago, you and I had a good-natured disagreement about whether Please Don't Be Waiting for Me was a YA book or not, a young adult.
We?
Well, we talked about it
Right.
because I read a lot of young adult literature, and I felt like it was a great fit for that category because teenage protagonists, very little oversight by the parents in their lives.
Right.
A lot of exciting things happen. I'm not going to argue with you on this one. This is not a YA book this time around.
No, and it just kind of happened.
Yeah. So let's start for the few people who maybe have not read the book. Why don't you start with a synopsis, and I'll turn this down so we
Of which? The first book or?
Yeah, this book.
This book.
Yeah, let's do a synopsis of this book, and then I think that would be great.
I will. Well, the first book, Please Don't. I think a lot of you have read that. So as you may know, it's a book about a bunch of teenage punk rockers living in Berkeley in the early '80s, and they party in San Francisco at the Mabuhay and all the punk clubs and stuff like that.
Where we all used to go.
Where we all used to go.
Speak for yourself. I grew up in Rochester, New York. We had nothing like that.
Go there. We'll talk
later.
So a lot of it's drawn from my own experiences, so I include a lot of detail about the hangs and the clubs and the bands and all that stuff. But it's also a mystery. One of them gets murdered outside the Mabuhay after an Avengers concert, and the boyfriend of the girl who's murdered gets accused, and because it's at a time when relationships with the punks and the police, Jello Biafra had just run for mayor, were very bad. They don't really depend on the police to help them out, so they set out to prove his innocence on the outside.
Is it one of the crowd?
Yes. So it's kind of like a punk rock Hardy Boys.
That's a very good description of it. I like that.
In the new book,
So Good It's Bad.
So Good It's Bad. One of the main character from the first book, Scott, has a band called Fist Music, and a couple of the other main characters are in the band, and it starts off with them on tour, and at a show, they're at the end of their tour. I mean, when I decided to write this book, it was like, I have so many horrendous tour stories. I could have made the book like 500 pages long. So at the end of the tour, they're doing a show in Reno, Nevada, and he takes very ill, and he wakes up to find himself in the home of a sort of a demented super fan. Yeah, it's kind of like punk rock misery. So she's in the house of this kind of crazy girl and her even crazier mother, and soon realizes that they're nursing him back to health, but they don't really have any intention of letting him go. So it's up to the rest of the band and the rest of the gang to find him, and that's what takes up most of the book.
So do you want to read a little snippet from it so you get a sense of the...
I'm trying not to pick anything too spoilery.
I don't know. Yeah.
This is a chapter that discusses, basically outlines their tour, and a lot of it describes a tour I had with a band called The Naked Into pretty exactly. For Scott, Fist Music's first and last U.S. tour had been as thrilling as it was ill-fated. A pause for nomenclature. The band had originally been named Sex Kibble, which was Scott's idea, but after an audience poll at one show resulted in a chorus of boos, it was rejected in favor of the Rotten Caterpillars, which was Fritz's no doubt pot-addled contribution. Fritz is the bass player. This moniker, or at least the distasteful image that it conjured, caused the little sister of their manager, Gary Schreiber, to literally vomit, after which he demanded that they change it. Fist Music was actually suggested by Benny, who had come across it in an old hard-boiled crime novel he was reading. That handle, several months on, appeared to be the one with staying power. After running the gauntlet of local punk dives, the band had decided that they needed to record an album, which they did in a series of late-night sessions at an 8-track studio housed in the basement of a local grindhouse theater. In a fortuitous accident, dialogue from the movie Don't Go in the House crept onto one of the tracks. Among the hits included therein were Nadia's song, Ronnie Looked at Johnny, a song about newly seated President Ronald Reagan getting in a fight with Johnny Rotten, Fascist Picnic, and Mommy Was a Commie, a salute to the Bay Area's many red diaper babies, of which Scott was proudly one. After they were turned down by almost the full roster of local independent labels, the UC Berkeley radio station, KALX, picked up one of their early demos for heavy airplay and made something of a local hit out of it. To be fair, Scott and Micah's proximity to the Nadia Balachek murder case also had some part in their eventual notoriety. That's the murder that takes place in the first book. At this point, another label came forward and offered to put their album out, a deal they accepted with perhaps too little hesitation. That label was the pet project of a young yuppie-ish woman who could be described as possessed of mysterious means. She would soon prove to have more interest in dusting her navel cavities with this capital than spending it on promoting and distributing Fist Music's record. The result of this was that the band time and again arrived to play in cities where no one had heard of them. The record was not in the local college station's playlist, nor was it in stock at the local cool record store. There were happy accidents, an opening act's sudden notoriety, a club owner had inspired to promote them, but in many cases this led to them sometimes playing to as few as 5 people. Another thing they had learned on this tour was that not every city has its own Mabuhay Gardens. Sure, Portland had its Satyricon, and Boston had the Rat, but in many towns the venue where a punk band played had often played host to a blues band the night before, and was hosting a metal band the night after. Nowhere was this more striking than it was with Reno's Spur and Saddle, which was exactly what it sounded like, a shit-kicking country dive, the bar of which was lined with beardy rednecks who eyed the band menacingly throughout their sound check. Apparently, the club had been rented for the night by a group of young punks who had tasked themselves with bringing Reno into the late 20th century. But those kids weren't here right now. What were here were the rednecks, and they were becoming bolder in their advances by the minute. One of them walking up to the stage and asking Fritz if his balls had dropped yet. Fritz had a good sardonic laugh at this stereotypically macho gambit. You might think that he, out of all of them, would be the most desperate to get back to San Francisco. This character is gay. But this kind of adversity seemed to give him a perverse charge. He was certainly not short on acidic comebacks to these remarks. No, but when they do, you'll have to take a number, he told the cowboy.
All right, so what percentage of that was real life, was drawn from?
Okay, well, let me tell you. A large percentage of it was taken
80,
from life.
85?
85%, I'd say. The whole thing about the label we signed with, definitely no distribution, no promotion of any kind. And I think the thing was, she had released a hardcore record before us. I mean, we weren't a punk band, we were more of a new wave type band. And that had sold pretty well, because hardcore has kind of a built-in audience.
Right.
You know, so she didn't really know what to do with us, so she just did nothing.
Well, she did coke, it sounds like.
She did. Yeah,
She knew what to do.
obviously did a lot of coke. So, yeah, we were left high and dry. So we literally did play a lot of shows to less than 10 people.
Yeah.
5 people, and so I know, thanks.
It's a character building thing.
It is a character. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it was an awful experience, but it, you know, I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
Yeah.
You know.
Did you ever get more than 10?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. You know, not. That wasn't typical, but we did have a couple shows, you know, where there were a lot of people. Usually in really weird places, you know, like Youngstown, Ohio was like one of our best shows. You know, so you never know.
So at what point did you know that you were going to write a sequel to Please Don't Be Waiting for Me? When did that occur to you to do?
That's a good question, because it wasn't really warranted by audience demand. I mean, I just decided I wanted to write one. I mean, people who read it seemed to like it so much and like the characters so much. I thought it would make them happy, you know, and I like the characters too, so I wanted to revisit the characters.
Yeah.
And I've since decided that it's going to be a trilogy,
That was
whether
my next
anyone
question.
likes it or not. Yeah, I've finished the first draft of the third
Cool.
book, and I'm very excited about it.
Did you feel like there was unfinished business with the characters, or you just wanted to see where they went in a new landscape with a new set of adventures?
Well, I thought the idea of following Scott's band was interesting for the reason I said before. I have a lot of material, yeah, I think you know, this takes place a year after the first book, so they're still dealing with the stuff that
Right.
happened in the first book, which was pretty traumatic. You know, Benny, who was the boyfriend of Nadia, who was murdered and who was, you know, charged with the killing for a while, you know, is obviously trying to, you know, re-enter. You know, he's still nursing his wounds, and he's trying to, you know, get back into the world of romance. And,
Right.
You know, so that was interesting to me.
So for the sequel, every character in the book is dealing with a whole lot more than poor Benny was in the first book.
Yes.
Because there is rape, there is incest, there is
Yeah.
torture, there's
Yeah.
there's multiple murders. So you went real dark real fast this time.
I did.
And I'm curious to know why and,
Yeah, I
and
knew.
sort of how you
yes.
thought, what you thought about that.
Well, what happened was, I based the story on 2 actual incidents. You know, one.
Hopefully not that you went through.
No.
Good
I
Lord.
know my mom read this book. She goes, "That didn't happen to you, did it?" We did play a show. The band I was in, B Team, we played a show in Reno. And also, I hope no one hears from Reno, because you could call the book one long love letter to Reno, Nevada.
Could you?
No, not at all.
I think I read
yeah.
a different book.
But we played a show in Reno that went down kind of like, you know, all the kids who showed up were really weird and intense, and there was this one girl, like the thing where she says to him, "Kiss me," and it's a subliminate. She said that to me. I still have no idea what she was talking about. She was very odd. We got the hell out of there, because it was very clear we were supposed to stay with them, and it was very clear that something was expected of us in return, and none of us were happy about that. So we got the hell out of there. I have another friend who will remain nameless, who while on tour took ill and was and indeed was taken home by a somewhat unbalanced super fan and her mom, and it was he read the book. It was probably, you took it a little farther, you know. But you know, so I used that, but obviously I extrapolated on it.
Right.
And I felt like I had to have the, I don't know, the audacity of my premise in that, you know, if I put him in that situation, obviously there's an aspect, there's a sexual aspect to the parallel.
Right.
You know, because the women are sort of treating him like a pet.
Right.
But they're also abusing him really terribly. So I felt like I kind of had to go there, you know, to just, because it would have been a cop-out not to.
Right.
And I did realize I was going a lot farther. I was kind of taking it out of the realm of YA. I mean, the initial novel I intended to position as sort of a YA crossover novel, but you know, I didn't get much feedback on the first book from young people. Most of it was from people my age.
Right.
So it's like I don't really have a perspective on that. But yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, there may be young people of a more hard-bitten nature, but I would not recommend this to, you know, any parent.
You don't want to give it to the 7th grade girl in your life.
No,
I don't
you
think
don't
so,
want
but
to.
you
It's
know, but
pretty
I think you're right. I
intense.
think older teenagers would be fine with it.
Yeah,
Just,
I
you
think
know.
so. But it is.
Did you watch television?
Yeah.
Right.
Who play video games? Yeah, they
Right.
probably are.
Right.
Did you know when you started writing this one? Did you have it all mapped out, or did it come to you as you were writing?
I write, when I do my first draft, I write really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to have a general framework, and I kind of race through it, and then I go back through it and fix it in the editing. And the result, my first drafts are just rife with all kinds of weird mistakes because I just race through it.
That's the whole point of first drafts. They're not. Nobody should ever see the light of day with a first draft.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You know, and I feel like,
Not even. You don't even take it to your editor till you're on 4.
yeah, I feel like I didn't go into going, oh, I'm going to make this really dark. I'm
Yeah.
going to alienate anybody who liked the first book.
Well, I don't, and just to be clear, I don't think you alienated your audience from the first book. It's just got a different tone to it than,
Yeah.
than the first book
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Also, there's, I think, a theme of these books, as I talked about in the first book, is that these kids, in calling themselves punks and dressing the way they do, and acting the way they do, sort of align themselves with like the lowest strata of society, and they're all like middle class
Right.
kids living in the Berkeley Hills and whatnot.
Right.
But I mean, in doing that, they're kind of limning the periphery of sort of a subterranean world of you know, lots of sadness and pain and evil, and sometimes they fall into it, and that's what these books are about, you know. And also I felt I won't like explain this forever, but I also felt like it's a sequel, so you want to up the ante. You want your villains to be more frightening and despicable. And Ray and Trog and Reggie in the first book were pretty.
Well, they had comedic elements to them.
They
too.
did have
Yeah.
comedic elements to them
Yeah.
too. Yeah, these ones really
Not so
don't.
much.
Yes. It's like,
Should we stop here and see if there are any audience questions? Anybody have any questions? I have more, but we have such a nice group. Just checking.
Do you have as great a name for your third book? These are great names.
Right now it's called Days of Midnight. Well, hello. And it'll probably be out like this time next year. So. The other thing I want to say about what I read is it mentions the song, Nadia's song, which of course is about Nadia, who died in the first book. And if you can actually hear the song if you go to the website, which is sogooditsbad.net. I actually recorded a couple songs, you know, since it's about a band, there should be songs. So I recorded Nadia's song, which was fun because I tried to make it sound like sort of a you know, a teenage punk band, and like the lyrics I had fun with because I tried to make them a little naive, you know, and a little bit like a 17-year-old trying to wax poetic. You know,
Well,
so-
I saw in the
right.
that I was looking at the music. I'm like, wait a minute, copyright 1980? Did he write a song that he would then later write a book about? What happened? What's this about? You have this.
Well, that's the one joke.
Okay, good.
Which I hope I won't get in trouble with the copyright.
It's
office
very
for.
clever though, because I sat
Yeah.
and looked at it. I'm like, wait, I'm so confused. Was that Todd's band?
Right.
Is he Scott? I don't know what's happening now.
Right.
And then I fell asleep.
Well, yeah, I get that. Yeah. That's-
Things you
so
think
many
about
of
at
my
midnight.
stories end like that.
Well,
Yeah, and I had to come up with middle names for all of them too, which was fun.
What real life band would you say Scott's band is most like?
Huh, that's a really good question. I guess I imagine being kind of like Husker Du or something like that, sort of pop, but very, you know, hard. Yeah, that would be the first one that comes to mind. Yeah.
So I have another question. Have you guys seen Blind Spotting yet? Has anybody seen
No.
Blind Spotting?
I've not seen it.
Fantastic
Oh, it's
movie. Fantastic movie. One of the best movies I've seen. And what I loved about it, we actually were at a panel last night and heard the two main actors talking about it. And what I loved about it was that it really attempts to capture a moment in time for Oakland. So it's the current moment in time, it happens to be, as Oakland is undergoing so much change and there's conflict around that. And it made me think of your book because in both books you've done a really lovely job of capturing what it was like to be a punk in the early 80s in
Right.
San Francisco. And I wonder, in the same way that Oakland's changing really quickly, San Francisco's changing. San Francisco's ahead of us on that curve.
San
And I wonder,
Francisco's kind of done.
yeah,
I
right.
think, you know,
So I wondered
compared to
how
Oakland.
much,
Silicon Valley
whether there
now.
was any, whether subliminally or not, was that, do you think, part of why you wanted to write it was to remember that period and memorialize
I think
that
so.
period?
Yeah, I mean, there's
'Cause you
definitely
can't
some
find,
things.
Mabuhay's gone, right?
Right. I mean, the structure is still there. It's a nightclub called Fame now.
Tacky and ironic.
Yeah, it is rather. But yeah, I mean, some of the stuff actually, it kind of hurts a little bit. Like, there's a little part where I talk about Benny meeting Bridge at a diner on Kearney Street, which I used to. No, not they go to Clown Alley though. Clown, yes. No, it was a diner on a big place on, I think it was California and Kearney, and it had two like big horseshoe shaped counters, and I used to go there for lunch every day and get like a chocolate malt and a grilled cheese sandwich.
Like the cable car diner or something?
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
Used to
But
go.
but I wrote about it. It was like one of the last vestiges of working class San Francisco in the financial district.
By the way, Clown Alley is now a Basque restaurant.
Really?
Oh.
Oh, jeez.
And the Reno people have taken over.
Right, exactly.
Does anyone here remember the battle for the I Hotel? That was on
Yes.
Kearney
Yeah.
I
Road.
do
Yeah.
remember that. Yes.
That was the era that I was there.
Uh-huh.
I missed the punk stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
But the way the book sort of captures and memorializes it, I think, is really nice because I didn't move here until till the late '90s, so this stuff was pretty foreign to me. But you do a wonderful job of creating it as a 3D environment, like what it
Thank
feels
you.
like
Yeah.
to be there. And I just wondered how much of it was out of a sort of a sense of nostalgia for you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I feel a lot of twinges, in writing it. Also, that really was. It was a great time to be young. Because it was cheap. You could live in I mean, I had a room in a Victorian on Church Street for about $200 a
Oh my
month.
God.
I know. It's gonna-
That's what you pay for the mailbox.
Right, exactly. Your parking space or something, yeah. But yeah, and there's you could work a temp job as I did, and you have enough money, beer money for the week, and bands were playing every night. But then again, Ronald Reagan was president. We were all scared we were gonna die any minute. That sounds familiar.
So-
Maybe that's why this book is darker, huh?
That also may, you know what? That probably has something to do with it also.
We're all darker.
Yes.
Is the development of any of your characters through the series surprising you? Have they taken turns at?
Well, some of them have developed as that has been a result of audience demand. Like one of the characters I didn't intend to be a really big character was Scott's dad. And people liked him so much in the first book that he's very prominently featured in this one. Also Bridge, I mean that doesn't surprise me because I intended for Bridge to be a big character. But I think that's about it. There's more, in the third book there's a lot of surprises. Some old characters come back and figure pretty heavily in it. So.
Do you think the third book will stand alone for people who read it?
I think so. I mean, it's set 4 years later. It's also set against the backdrop of the 1984 Democratic Convention that took place in San Francisco and all the protests that went on at the time in which a lot of punks took part. I mean, the news were calling it the punk protests, even though there were a lot of other interests involved. So I think it's a document of that. I think this stands alone too, but I think it helps if you have an investment in the characters, so I can, ruin your life by messing with. My lovely wife stopped reading it at one point and said, I like these characters and I don't like what you're doing. So,
They almost all make it to the end.
yeah.
Do you
But they
start
do.
with an outline in terms of your characters so you kind of know what they're like and not so much what's gonna happen to them, but how they develop as personalities, or does that just kinda happen as you write them?
It kind of happens. I mean, I think it's internalized. I have an outline, but I don't, map it out physically. I think it's in here, and that's one of the fun things about writing is that, they kind of act according to their natures, and I don't have to really force it much, So.
Do you want to read another excerpt? I think
Yeah.
you have two for us.
Speaking of Bridge, let me wet my whistle. Is this yours? Or
I
mine?
haven't opened anything, so that must be
That's
yours.
yours.
Right.
Mine must be the candy, the box of candy.
Yeah. It is just a scene that I really like. It's sort of a little vignette where Bridge has achieved emancipation from her horrible father from the first book, but one of the conditions is that she see a counselor every week. So this is her in one of her sessions and she has to race back from Reno and take a break from the search for Scott to go see her counselor. So this is how that goes. Bridge had taken a very bumpy shuttle ride from Reno and was now sitting across from her social worker, Lily, in her pointedly not at all disturbing office. Lily was essentially a mental health worker, a mental health counselor to be exact, and brought with her all of the innate flaws and virtues of that profession. For instance, when Bridge was having a hard time and needed her support, Lily was always right on it. Being empathetic was her job, after all. But then there were days like today, when Bridge didn't really have anything to say at all. After all, when you're seeing a counselor every week on an ongoing basis, it gets hard to come up with a discussion-worthy crisis every time. She imagined television writers had the same problem. The pitfall here was that for any counselor worth his or her smelling salts, it is a time when a patient says they have nothing to say that they actually have the most to say, and no amount of poking and probing is too excessive to break through that patient's denial to prize out the truth. The irony here was that Bridge really did have a lot that she could talk about, if she had deemed it wise to do so. She knew that mental health professionals were required to call the police if a patient either confessed to involvement in a crime or to planning to commit one. She did not know whether that applied to being adjacent to or having knowledge of a crime, and so she decided it was best to keep mum. Such reticence now had her caught in an inextricable loop of conciliatory doubt, all expressed by Lily in that over-solicitous tone unique to so many therapists, a tone that might best be used to address a baby holding a live hand grenade. Bridget, you say that you're fine, but what does fine mean to you? Bridget shrugged helplessly. It means fine, like the absence of things that are not fine. I see, she mused, making a note on her pad. And what about little Bridget? Is little Bridget fine also? Little Bridget was the name of what Lily called Bridget's inner child, a therapeutic term for that unpredictable little bundle of compartmentalized childhood wounds that often dictated a patient's behavior without her knowing it. At times like this, Bridget felt that Lily was grabbing little Bridget by the ankles and pummeling her over the head with her. Yes, little Bridget is fine also. I see. And if you visualize little Bridget right now, what would she be doing? She's sitting in a sandbox with a little tea set, and she's trying to feed tea to a big stuffed bunny rabbit, but the bunny rabbit can't drink it because she doesn't have a real mouth. I see. And how do you think the bunny rabbit feels about not having a mouth? Oh my God, Bridge thought. Do you think that the bunny might sometimes want to cry, or scream, or express his feelings? Jesus Christ, Lily, the bunny rabbit is fine. Little Bridget is fine. I am fine. I am good, copacetic, mollified, etc. I keep telling you that, but you keep coming back at me with the same question. What do you want from me? Lily sat back and put her hands in a steeple position, her bespectacled eyes never leaving Bridget's face. I want you to stop dyeing your hair. What? I want you to be yourself and be happy with who you are. This is who I am, she said, barely containing her anger. And do you like who you are? Yes, I love who I am. Then why do you try to push people away? What do you mean? The way you dress. Do you want to scare people? Some of them. Here her tone was matter of fact. Why was this so hard to understand? What about the rest? She shrugged. If people want to be my friend, they'll take the time to get to know me and not dismiss me based on the way I look. My look is an easy way to filter those people out and find the ones who are worthy of my time. I see. Life is short, Lily. As if to confirm this, Lily looked at her watch. I see our time is up for today.
Sounds just like that.
I was just gonna say, who's got a therapy story they want to share? So, was there, I know, I mean, obviously, as a musician, I bet you had a soundtrack that you were listening to when you were writing, or a soundtrack that you were thinking of as you were writing. I don't
Sure.
know. Tell us about that.
All the old favorites, Sex Pistols, Clash, Buzzcocks.
Your old favorite.
Right, exactly.
Is there a playlist on your website? You should do that.
No, there is not.
That would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, I should
Because
do
I'd be
that.
curious to hear that.
Yeah, I have websites for each book. On the Please Don't Be Waiting For Me website, there is a YouTube playlist
Mhm.
with a lot of songs on it. So,
Hook one
which
up-
I
hook
think
one
if
up
I
for
did
this one,
one on
too.
this one, it would probably be all the same stuff. But
Yeah.
I'll just link to
Panic
it.
button.
Panic. Speaking of, yeah, Bliss didn't have much in the way of tourist stories, did we?
Tourist stories?
Tour stories.
Tour stories.
Yeah.
No, it was more Bob for me.
Oh, that's right. You were in
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah.
Well, wait, do you have did you ever kill anybody? Like, should we know? Were you ever kidnapped by a fan? Tell us now.
Somewhat.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us.
But it wasn't worth memorable.
One other thing I wanted to mention is something I forgot. In the chapter, when I said that when I talked about the band name, and I said it had been Rotten Caterpillars, which is an awful name, I had a contest on Facebook for people to name Scott's band, just come up with a good punk rock band name. And that was the winner, which gives you some indication of how few people
I thought Stomach Uproar was it?
Stomach Uproar would be, yeah, there were some, I could have come up with better ones off, but,
Oh my
you know,
gosh, that's good.
so I had to pick from the people, actually.
Any other, do we have other audience questions?
Well, there's a lot of you now.
Yeah, it's a good crowd you
Yeah.
pulled here.
We should have started a little later.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're working on the third book now. Where are you in that
Yeah.
process?
I've completed the first draft, and I'm gonna be sitting on it for a while.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna be working on another film book also.
Oh, okay.
So.
Do you want to talk about your film book? I've got one of
Sure.
those I can hold up.
Yeah, I also wrote a book called Funky Bollywood, which was published by.
I'm playing
an
Carol
outfit.
Merrill tonight's
Yeah.
book reading. You're old enough to remember who that is.
Vanna White.
Vanna White,
Yes.
Carol Merrill.
And win this book that Nancy is showing you now. Yeah, this was published by an outfit in England called Fab Press, and it's basically a catalog of Bollywood action movies from the 70s,
Oh.
and it's a really fun book. And the next book is going to be a collection of my online film reviews, and they're going to be organized geographically, so it's going to be like a world tour through strange and unusual films, and it's going to be called The Sophisticate's Guide to Global Cinema. And then, but on the cover there's going to be like, you know, Godzilla and stuff like that. So.
Sorry, go ahead.
I know, I was just wondering if it's on, if you have a website for that already? or-
No, not yet, because I'm trying to, it's really big, like the manuscript is 650 pages long, and so I'm trying to convince my publisher to take it, so we're sort of bargaining back and forth in ways in which we could make it happen. What he would like to do is do some kind of a Kickstarter or GoFundMe campaign to, you know, if you want to see this book published, hey, throw us some shekels and we'll see if we can do it. So that's probably what we're going to do.
Is that Fab Press also?
Fab Press, yes. They're great. They basically just publish niche film books, like cult film books, and they're really nice. The publisher is a graphic designer, so everything is really designed, you know, as much as it can be. I was really happy with how that book turned out. Because I was about to self-publish it, and it would have been in black and white, and he insisted on everything being full color. It's Bollywood, so
Right.
Yeah,
it's
that's-
gorgeous.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and I have some copies here if anybody wants to buy one.
That iconic,
Funny thing. Yeah.
that iconic method of labeling the films bromance,
Yes.
villains, lair, and
Right.
was really, as I was working my way through the book, I'd look for those icons.
I tried to make it very fun,
Yeah.
you know, because I knew it was a topic that people are kind of intimidated by. So,
So given your writing about film, did you think about these two books cinematically? I mean, were you kind of in your mind's eye
Definitely.
watching it play out? And,
yes, definitely. I mean, I think both books are really influenced by film noir.
Mhm.
And Italian giallo films, which are these sort of very stylish murder mysteries. Definitely, I could see, you know, if I was going to script it for a TV or movie version, I'd definitely have a bunch of shots that I would specify.
Right.
You know, so.
Right.
Yeah, I think the way I describe them, I often describe scenes in terms of the light or
Mhm.
things like that. So yes,
Mm-hmm. That
definitely.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Other questions?
I'm curious did you start writing after you finished with your music, or were you doing
Yes.
both?
Pretty much. Yeah, I kept up with music for a long time. I was putting out solo CDs and doing solo shows, and that eventually that kind of broke my heart. You know, it was like, you know, so I decided to. I always wrote. I could always write, so I decided to take that up, and I did. I started writing online, actually. I started doing a blog.
Uh-huh.
I started writing for some other film websites, and then I ended up co-hosting these podcasts. So I have like a very deep footprint on the internet. And then from writing about films online, Yeah, it's a
Very
really good
popular.
book. Yeah.
So what's the best place for people to go to find out about all your many activities on the web? What's the best website to go to?
Probably I have my blog, which is called Die Danger Die Kill.
That's the URL, right? What's the
Yeah,
URL?
actually, it's diedangerdiekill.blogspot.com. Yeah. And if you go there, or you could go to
You can probably just Google Todd Stadtman and you'd probably get there.
Yeah.
pretty
right, or you could go to pdbwfm.com, which is the website for this book, and there's a link to the blog on that.
Do you see either of these books becoming movies?
Yes, I would love that. I think they would make really good movies. I'm just not sure how to go about it.
I have a question. I'm real ignorant, but when you talk
Okay.
about your first book and your second book, I always think it's fun to start with the first book. Do you think that it's important if to read your first book before your second book, or are they completely different books and it doesn't matter?
They're not completely different, but I think you could read this book without reading the first one. I think it would be enhanced by reading the first book.
I think you'd feel sad if you'd missed the first book. The first book is quite good, and
Yeah.
then this can act as a sequel. So
Yeah.
they're not kind of standalone projects. They definitely it's the same set of characters. And
Yes.
in the second book, they're dealing with stuff, the fallout of things that happened in the first book.
Right, and I don't stop to do a lot of character introduction in this one, because I do kind of go. I did all the heavy lifting of establishing the characters in the first one, so I don't really.
But luckily, we have both here, so
Yes.
it's easy to
Are
stock
they
up.
from real people or fictitious or?
They're
Yes.
like, most of them are based on you, actually, but, no, they're,
You in the book?
they're all,
Valentino, right?
Ralph and I were in he was the drummer in my high school band, which
Okay.
was called the Blitz a long time ago.
But I was already out.
Yeah, that's right. You were the father figure of the band. Yeah, no one character is based completely on one person, but they're all kind of composites of various people. I use various traits.
Anybody recognizable?
I don't know.
Has anybody come up to you and said, hey,
That's
guy."
me. You'll hear from my lawyers. Yeah, it was kind of fun to take all my friends and steal various personality traits and mix and match them. I mean, the character of Micah in the book is based pretty strongly on one person in particular, because there was one person in our group who was kind of the protector, who was kind of like the more physical, person, so, but that's the closest, I think, and everybody asks if Scott is me, and it's like, no, but, I mean, Scott is a lot more physically courageous than I was then or now, but he's
Is
my,
there a heroine in the book?
yes,
Okay.
Bridget.
A couple of them.
Bridge, yeah,
Letty.
actually, this one, Letty,
I
has a
like
big
Letty.
part in that too.
Yeah.
And then there's Scott's dad, right?
Scott's dad.
It's all in there.
Yeah.
But you should tell me more about
Oh, just that I have my son who lives in LA, runs a small management production company, and they do books into movies and
Oh, really?
comics and sci-fi and all kinds of, so
Okay.
if you wanted, I could, give him your name and stuff and have him read the two books and see if they might be interested.
He wants that.
I do.
Yes, I'm gonna go
I
ahead
would
and
like
accept
that.
that on his behalf.
Yeah, I would like
Okay.
that very much.
Give me
Why
your-
don't you do one more
your
question?
information.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask this last question. On my Midlife Mixtape podcast, every guest, no matter who they are, I always ask them two things. One in the beginning, one thing in the beginning, one thing at the end, and in the between it can be anything. But I think we covered the first question last year, which is always what was the first concert you saw and what were the
Yes, we did, and
circumstances?
it was Paul McCartney and Wings.
That's
at
right.
the house.
So we did that
Wings
already.
Over America tour.
So the last question, you're gonna have to get philosophical.
That's a secret
What
question.
what one thing do you wish you could go back and tell yourself, or do you wish you could tell people younger than you?
Hmm.
It's a little off topic with the book, but it's my question, so.
Well, I think the thing, you know, when you're young, you don't have a sense of the dynamics of experience. You know, it's like when things are bad, you're just like, oh, it's always going to be awful. You know, so I mean, it's kind of a cliche, but it's just like, you know, not it gets better, though that's a good thing, but you know, it'll change whether you
Right.
like it or not. It's
Right.
going to change. So, you know,
That's a good one. Nothing's
Yeah.
permanent, good or
nothing
bad.
is permanent.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, Todd Stadtman, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
tonight. The book is So Good It's Bad. His other titles are also here. And in a minute, Todd will be on the couch back in the right before the children's section, and you can buy your book, and Todd will sign it for you,
I will.
and you can exchange information. That's,
Yes.
Let's let this lady go first, shall we? All right, and I'm Nancy Davis Kho, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kathleen, for keeping the bookstore
Yes.
open late for us. We'll put your music back on. Should we put your soundtrack back? Oh, I think it.
No.
She did. There we go.
You and I are.